Just hello everyone. So yeah, I'm Tarek and I work at Mozilla in the services team. So basically, we're building web services for various applications. For example, if you use Firefox, because we all use Firefox, right? Raise your hand if you use Firefox. Well, that's not too bad. So, for example, you can synchronize your bookmarks between your Firefox desktop browser and your phone, and that's a feature we've built at Mozilla Services, and it's basically a bunch of web services that are letting you synchronize your devices. And those services, sometimes they break, and in theory, when you build a web application, in a perfect world, what you do is you build your application and then you deploy it to a dev server and you play with it with all your colleagues, and everyone thinks it's fantastic. We should put it in production as soon as possible. So you start to set up a stage server, you do some load testing, everything is fine, it works perfectly. You do a little bit of QA on it, and once everyone is happy, you put it on production server and everything is smooth. So who here did that right here without any issue? Please raise your hand. Okay, so we know that's not the truth. The truth is that sometimes, well, most of the time in practice, something will break. I don't know. I have many examples, but when you build a stack that has many small pieces that interact together, it's impossible to have everything run smoothly, and you will have issue. It could be, for example, your LDAP server that works perfectly well and starts to break because its disk is full, or it could be anything where you didn't set up a configuration properly. So in practice, whatever you do, you will break things at some point in production, no matter what. And Vaurien, the project Vaurien, is intended to try to minimize this problem and to try to provide a way for you to be proactive for all those issues. Are you like this, Jeff? All right, I have one real-life example. It happened to us in Firefox Sync. So when I joined Mozilla, I was asked to rewrite sync in Python. The previous version was in PHP, and they say, okay, we wanna move to Python for various reasons. So we should move to all the code to Python. So we did it. It was quite simple because the hard thing in Sync is not about the web application, but basically about the databases. So we rebuilt all the web services in using Python, and we deployed it, and we were super happy. I was doing some load testing on my laptop. It was working really well, and I was telling all my PHP colleagues, hey, PHP sucks. You're gonna see Python is great. It's gonna be faster. And so when we went into production, everything broke miserably, and we had to revert the Python version we pushed in production and go back to the PHP version. And that was a horrible day for me because I had a lot of people making fun of me, like, hey, Python suck, PHP is so better, I don't even know why we moved to Python, blah, blah, blah. So what happened is that the Python Sync application was doing some queries to a backend server using sockets, and there were a bug where the socket, the API, the code used to actually send data to the socket, was using the send method of the socket in the Python standard library, and that's basically calling the underlying Linux send method. And the thing is, when you do this call, if you are in very high load, you're not sure that all the data is going to go through. So what you need to do is to check the number that this API turns you back, and make sure that if some of the data was not sent, you have to resend it. And the right pattern to do this is actually to do a little loop and send the data back and back again until everything went through. And this happens only when you are on very high load. And I wasn't able to reproduce it on my own computer. The only place where we reproduced this issue was in production, and everything broke. And Python provides another API that's very simple and that's safe to use. It's a send all. So we eventually found this bug and fixed it. But the point is, how could we prevent this? What can I do to make sure that this is not happening again in the future? And can I do that for other usual errors as well? So how many people use MySQL here? Okay. How many people had this error, MySQL connection lost? Okay. So that happens when you keep an open connection on MySQL, and the MySQL server is usually configured to drop the connection after it's idling for some time. And if you use the regular Python drivers that connects with the MySQL server, they won't handle reconnection. It's up to you to do the reconnection. So that's one usual failure you have when you interact with a MySQL server. You have, of course, all the timeout errors. If you use a server, a backend server, like a database, that starts to get really slow because you have a lot of load on it. What's going to happen, of course, is that at some point your connector will time out. And if you don't manage this timeout, you might end up in a situation where all your connector in your pool are just stacking up and nothing works anymore. So you have to deal with the timeout. You have to deal also with the too many connection error, which is basically happening if you don't raise the number of file descriptors you're allowed to use on a server. So that's a very typical error that happens when you are on high load. Every time you do a connection on a backend, a file descriptor is used to open a socket, and once you don't have any more file descriptor available, you get this error. So what happens in your application when this happens? Is your application handling this case properly? Once the server is back to life, the backend server is working again, is your application working again? Stuff like that. So this testing all the input-output of your web application with all the backends is something people don't do. Most of the application we have that goes in production usually have lots of bugs there. And what happens is that you correct them as they happen, and you do some bug fixing, and after a while your application is more robust. But it's a shame because you could probably prevent most of the bugs you will have in production if you think about testing all the input-output of your backends. So how can we improve this? So one way we did it before we had Vaurien was basically to do it manually. So I was working with the ops. I was like, okay, on the phone, turn off MySQL. Okay, it's done. Okay, let me see. Okay, it's broken. Turn it on. Yeah, it works. Okay. But if you do this, if you have, I don't know, 20 backends, like an application like Firefox Marketplace interacts with 20 other servers, it's impossible to do it properly. So manual testing is something I don't want to do. I want to be able to automate this I/O testing and be able to run it just by calling a test or something. So Vaurien is the tool we built to try to address this issue. It's basically a TCP simulation feature. It was inspired from the Chaos Monkey they have at Amazon. So who knows about the Chaos Monkey? So here's the story. It's basically at Amazon they have this very cool and scary thing where they just walk around in data center and unplug random servers. And yeah. Sorry? Netflix. Oh, Netflix, yeah. Why? It's not Amazon, sorry, it's Netflix. So they just plug the random server and just wait and see if everything works. And because their architecture is supposedly fail-safe, high availability, and etc., unplugging a server should not break anything. So I don't want to be a developer there. It's really scary. But anyways, Vaurien is like the chaos monkey, and that's why I use the small chaos monkey logo from the Family Guy cartoon at the beginning. It's exactly the same idea, but only for a TCP application. So it's a way to plug and unplug the connection between your web application and your backend server. So here's the design. Basically, you have an application that interacts with a backend using TCP, and you can start Vaurien. It's a simple TCP proxy that will sit between your application and your backend, and it's designed in two parts. The first part is what we call the protocol. So basically, when you run a Vaurien proxy, you say, hey, this Vaurien proxy will use the MySQL protocol. So when some data comes in the socket, it knows how to handle MySQL TCP data, and it knows how to grab it, pass it to the MySQL backend that's connected behind, and pass back the response to the application. Because it's not possible to do a generic TCP proxy that understands all the protocol out there. For a simple reason, for example, when you do a HTTP proxy, you can just pass what the request you get, and well, you have also to handle stuff like connection that stay persistent. And for MySQL, when you connect to a MySQL server, the server is the one that sends the first data. So when you open a socket to MySQL server, it would tell you, hey, who are you? What protocol do you want to use? So it's the other way around. And that's why we have several protocols. And the other part of Vaurien is the behavior. So basically the behavior is a hook on the stream of data that's going back and forth. And in this hook, you can do whatever you want. You can hang the socket. You can put some crappy data in the socket. You can do whatever you want, slow it down and stuff like this. And this behavior works in two places. It's called before the data is sent from the application to the backend, and after the data is coming back from the backend to the application. And that lets you do whatever you want with the thing. So here is an example with MySQL. So what I do is, in my application, instead of calling MySQL on the port 306, it uses another port, 307, and I configure Vaurien to listen on incoming connection on 07, and it connects itself to the MySQL server on the 06 socket. And it uses the MySQL protocol here, and it has two events that are calling in this example, the daily behavior. They are called on before handle and on after handle. And in this example, what I do is just slow things down. For example, I'm going to say, hey, from now on, all the queries that will be done on my SQL server will take 10 seconds. And I want to see how my web app is reacting to this. Or hey, it's gonna last a minute, because on really high load, sometimes you have a query that's just stuck there working for a minute. Yeah. It works on the packet level. So when I say it understands the MySQL protocol, it means it knows how to pass things back and forth. But you could write we'll see later that you could write your own protocol, and you could, for example, create your own MySQL server, I guess, or something that do some specific behavior, you're not even forced to have a backend behind the proxy. You can just send back something as soon as you get a query. But here, the one we ship with Vaurien is basically just understanding the headers and sending back the right thing. And we also have other protocol built in, as we'll see later. Hey, here they are. So we have HTTP, Memcache, MySQL, Redis, SMTP. And we also have the generic TCP one, which basically sucks all the data in the socket and send it back. And when the response comes back, suck it and send it back front. And that doesn't work if you have some servers that are expecting some kind of ping pong between the application and the backend. For example, if you use an Elasticsearch server, you have to use the HTTP protocol because Elasticsearch uses the keep alive feature of HTTP. And so that's important to use the HTTP protocol. Behaviors. We have the blackout, the delete, the dummy, the error, and the hang. The dummy is just a transparent protocol behavior. It doesn't do anything. And that's what we can use just to make sure that everything is set up correctly. The hang one is my favorite. It just grabs the socket and hangs there, and nothing happens. And this is really, really bad for most applications. You can break most applications with this behavior, because what happens in general is that the application starts to pile connection on the backend and just die. Unless you do the proper thing, which is to make sure that you can't have more than, I don't know, 10 connections to the backend, and you have a tight timeout for the connectors. So, how do you use Vaurien? The first way to use Vaurien is from the command line. We have a few options. So once you pip install Vaurien, you can use two options. The proxy option is basically the socket where Vaurien will start to listen to incoming connection. And the backend option is the one of the backend. So in the first example, I'm setting up a Vaurien proxy in front of a SMTP server, and I'm telling Vaurien to use the SMTP protocol. And in the behavior option, I'm saying that I want 5% of the connection to error out, and 10% of the connection to do some delays, and the rest to do a normal thing. And in this second example, I will have 5% of the MySQL connection hanging. And if you set up this proxy and start to do some load testing in your application, it's quite realistic. On high load, some MySQL queries are just hanging there. When you have like a big insert or a big update on your database and a lot of reading, some queries will start to be really, really slow. You can also use a configuration file. Here in this example, I'm saying that I want a proxy in front of Google using the HTTP protocol, and 20% of the queries will be delayed. And the delay time will be of 2 seconds per query. So you can use the -- config and just run it. All right, so another thing that I said earlier that is quite important is the ability to automate all this testing. So one way, so I showed you how to use Vaurien from the command line. That's really useful when you want to, for example, in stage, to deploy a Vaurien proxy and just let it run there and just see how things are going. So you just use the command line, and that's fun. But another approach is to have this testing in your functional test. So we provide a couple of a couple of API where you can start and stop a Vaurien proxy from within your unit test. Here in this example, in the setup, I'm starting a proxy on the port 8080, and I stop it on a teardown. And in my test, I have a context manager where I can do with client, with behavior error, do something. So basically, in this, hey, I have to use the laser. I forgot about it. All right, so here, I create a client for my Vaurien proxy, and I say, okay, in this piece of code here, I will tell the Vaurien proxy to start to do some erratic behavior. So this call is calling an API we provide in Vaurien. It's a HTTP API. It's going to call the Vaurien proxy and say, hey, for now on, all the query, all the requests you have on port 8080 will have to error. And here I can test my application and make sure that everything works as expected. So if you do this, it started to get really interesting because it means that you can start to write regression tests. Of course, it means that this test is expecting a server to be running behind. So it can be a little bit tedious to have a server running while you run unit tests, but it's possible. So yeah, I need to buy one of those. All right, so writing a behavior. Behaviors and protocols are plugins. We provide built-in behaviors and built-in protocols, but the idea is that you can write your own. For example, if you have a nasty LDAP error and you want to try to reproduce it in Vaurien, you can sniff with Wireshark or whatever and dump the data that's going back and forth between your LDAP server and the web app and build your own Vaurien stack. Here in this example, I'm showing how to create a delete behavior. So a behavior is basically a class with two methods. The first one is on before handle, and it's going to be called before the before Vaurien handle data, and on after handle is called after. So here what I do is super simple. I'm saying, okay, before you're handling any incoming request, I want you to sleep for this amount of time. And that's it. I can use from there this plugin in Vaurien and let bad things happen. Writing a protocol is the same thing, except that instead of having two methods to implement, you just have one method to implement, and it's called underscore handle. You guys know the Minitel? Yeah? Okay, the Minitel is what French people had before internet in France, and we didn't want to have internet because we thought the Minitel will rule the world. So we had those really small box like this with maybe 20 pixels on it, and we were very proud of it, and we were laughing at the world because people were starting to use internet because we had Minitel. It was French and stuff, and now it lasted for a long time, and when the internet got mainstream, people started to throw away their Minitel. But now, if you have a Minitel, it's like a very cool thing to have. It's a beautiful object you want to keep at home. So anyway, if you have a Minitel and you want to play with the Minitel with Vaurien, you can create your Minitel protocol, and you have to implement a handle method. And the handle method gets two sockets, the source socket, so the socket from the web app, and the destination socket. And to backend is just the direction. Am I going back or forth? And then you can implement whatever you want. You have the two sockets and you do whatever you want there. And of course, well, this is a mistake. Here it should be base protocol. And of course, you can use the built-in protocols we provide in Vaurien to inherit from them and do specific things. So we used Vaurien for Firefox Marketplace, which is this marketplace you can use with the Firefox OS phone, and because it's a huge Django application that has many backends, and we wanted to make sure that it was working well. So we started to set up, I think it was 14 or 15 Vaurien proxy behind the Django application. We had a Django settings module file that was just switching all the socket options. And then we started to play with the marketplace application, running load tests and stuff like this. And we found many issues here and there. Where we had an issue where the scenarii code was not working well. We had it badly configured. We had an issue with the database connector and stuff like this. So we were able to fix a lot of stuff before the marketplace went into production. And so what happens if I click here? Nothing. Okay. So this is a link. This is, I don't remember where it goes, but it's I'm pretty sure it's interesting. Yes. Oh, okay. What time is it? Okay, no, I can say more things if I have more time. 15 more minutes? Great. So, behaviors and protocols can also interact together. I said that you could send some crap using a protocol that errors out. So, for example, we have the error behavior we provide. Look at the protocol you're using to send realistic errors. So, if the protocol is HTTP, it's going to send the right kind of errors, like 500 or 512 or whatever number of HTTP errors. So it's going to send HTTP specific errors. And so if you build an environment where you want to have a realistic error, in your behavior, you can interact with the protocol and make sure you have something realistic. Okay, so I guess it's time for question. So the code, this is the repo. It's all open source and it's using the Apache license. So if you want to play with it, fork it, and join the fun. And we have a little bit of documentation here. And I would say I didn't touch the code in Vaurien for 3 or 4 months because it just worked for our needs. But in case you have a cool plugin or cool behavior, or if you find a weird bug, you're welcome to contribute. Or if you have ideas about making it better. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Hi.
Hi.
You compared the Vaurien to Chaos Monkey, and Chaos Monkey was designed to use in production. Did you use that in production?
No. So when you have a proxy like this, it adds a hoop. We could use it in production for a web application that doesn't have a lot of load. But if you put this in, I don't know, the Firefox marketplace is going to crash because having an extra hoop like this is not going to work for the speed. So, but on stage, we used it on stage. I set it up on stage and I didn't tell people and I could interact with the proxy to just break things sometimes. So for example, one pretty cool thing to do is when you have functional tests that runs on a stage server or a QA server, running your full test suite on your application with a slight delay on the database backend, it can be interesting. You can find a nasty bug sometimes.
Well, I have 2 questions. One is, can you start the proxy server and then interact with it to change its behavior?
Yes. So basically, we provide in Vaurien a client class and a client tool you can use to interact with the Vaurien proxy. The Vaurien proxy provides some really simple TCP REST-ish-like API, where you can say you can toggle the protocol and behavior it's using, so you can interact with it and change its behavior.
And the second question is because it looks quite useful, and in my environment we are using Oracle and RAC.
Okay.
Oracle, and its protocol is that you first contact with RAC and then you get information on which port you should connect.
Oh, interesting.
So like an active FTP, for example,
Yes.
like that. So do you have such support, or would it be hard to add such support?
So you contact Oracle on a given socket,
Yeah, you
and then you get to go to another one.
Yeah, you are told on the main connection where you should connect to do the real job.
Well, it won't work out of the box because it was not designed like this, but it could be an interesting thing to look at, because that's one use case, yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
Can you tell us something about the name?
Oh, the name. Oh, okay. So, so in my team, most of my team is in the States, and we are just two French guys in the team. And when we start a project, we try to find a name that it's hard to say in English. Just but it means a little brat in French.
Right.
You know those little kids you want to kill in a train or a plane.
Oh, okay. So, is it a revenge for Minitel?
Well, I guess, yeah. Exactly.
Anybody else?
Another good way to find a name that's hard to pronounce is to open an IKEA catalog.
Understand? You are developing your store, so it can handle delays, blackouts, and something like that.
Can you say it again? Sorry.
You're developing this Mozilla store, so it can handle the situations where one of backends is blackout or has delays. It's some kind don't break. You said most of the application can be broken.
Yes.
So I understand Mozilla Store is prepared for such situations.
Oh, you mean if the application we had are now fully, they never crash or whatever? That's the question?
Handle the situations, some kind.
Yes. Oh, okay. So when you use a tool like this, you end up finding good practices. For example, we have the LDAP connector to interact with the LDAP server, and we started to add a little bit of code to do the reconnection, to make sure that we had a pool of connectors and stuff like this, and we start to reuse it in other projects. So it means that after a while, most of your web apps start to have healthy, good habits on how to use backends. I guess that's because you used the Vaurien tool and you ended up doing the right thing.